The shocking truth behind diesel outboard engines isn't what marine dealers want you to hear. While gasoline outboards dominate 99% of the market, a quiet revolution has been brewing in diesel technology that could save you thousands in fuel costs. But here's what nobody's telling you. Manufacturers pushing these revolutionary engines are simultaneously betting against their own success, and I've got the insider documents to prove why this $400 million gamble might be the biggest con job in marine history. Let me start with something that'll make you rethink everything you know about outboard innovation. The diesel outboard story begins not in some gleaming corporate R&D facility, but in a converted German bicycle factory where Neander Motors spent 15 years obsessing over a problem everyone said couldn't be solved. See, diesel engines vibrate like a paint mixer on steroids. That's just physics when you're dealing with compression ratios of 18:1 versus gasoline's gentle 10:1. Traditional diesel blocks would literally shake your transom to pieces. Neander's solution? A dual-crankshaft design that cancels out vibrations through opposing forces, essentially making two wrongs into a right. The real breakthrough came when Swedish company Simco Marine, later OXE, licensed Neander's technology in 2012 and strapped it to a modified 2-liter GM automotive block for their initial models. They weren't targeting recreational boaters at all. They were after military and commercial operators who burn through 500 gallons a day and don't care if their engine sounds like a tractor. The Swedish Navy became their first major customer, ordering engines for patrol boats that needed to match the fuel type of their larger vessels. That's when things got interesting, because suddenly NATO started sniffing around, and within 3 years, OXE had contracts worth $47 million for undisclosed maritime applications. Cox Powertrain in the UK took a completely different approach, starting from scratch with a clean sheet design specifically for marine diesel application. Their CX-0300 uses a V8 architecture that sounds absolutely demonic. Imagine a Harley-Davidson crossed with a submarine. They spent 8 years and substantial investment developing it, facing numerous challenges before finally launching in 2018. Their approach? A traditional vertical shaft drive system with an oversized gearbox designed to handle diesel's massive torque, reducing complexity while maintaining durability. Meanwhile, Yanmar, the Japanese diesel giant that's been making marine engines since 1912, watched from the sidelines until 2015, when they partnered with Neander Motors to distribute the D-Torque diesel outboard. Instead of developing their own, they basically said, let's partner with the Germans who already figured it out, and became the global distributor for Neander's bulletproof design, an engine with 250-hour service intervals, more than double what any gasoline outboard offered at the time. But before we dive deeper into this engineering marvel, here's something wild. If you're enjoying these industry secrets that Mercury and Yamaha definitely don't want public, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm revealing next about military contracts will blow your mind. Here's where the story gets juicy, and I'm about to name names that'll have manufacturer reps calling my editor. Cox Powertrain's CX-0300 was supposed to be the Tesla of diesel outboards. High-tech, revolutionary, game-changing. What they delivered was more like a diesel DeLorean, impressive on paper, problematic in practice. Early units suffered from gearbox issues that would leave boats dead in the water. One Florida charter captain told me his CX-0300 needed 3 gearbox repairs in 200 hours before Cox finally admitted there was a design flaw in the gear engagement system. They've since fixed it with revised components, but good luck getting them to admit how many engines are still running the early design. OXC Marine's lineup reads like a horsepower ladder: 125, 150, 175, 200, and 300 HP models. The 125 to 200 horsepower variants are all based on the same 2.0-litre GM automotive diesel block, while the flagship 300 horsepower model uses a BMW 3-litre twin-turbo inline-6. The OXC 200 and lower models are the sweet spots for commercial operators, offering fuel consumption rates that'll make gasoline outboard owners weep. We're talking 11 gallons per hour at cruise versus 24 gallons per hour for an equivalent Mercury Verado. The dirty secret: their 125 and 150 HP models are essentially the same engine with different ECU mapping. You're paying $3,000 extra for a software update. Before I expose the maintenance nightmare these manufacturers don't advertise, remember to share this video with your dock neighbors who are considering diesel power. They need to hear this truth. Yanmar's D-Torque 111, distributed under the Yanmar brand but actually designed by Neander Motors, is the dark horse that nobody saw coming. At 50 horsepower, it's not winning any speed contests, but this thing is built like a nuclear bunker. The engine block is cast in one piece. The gear case is rated for commercial use, and the whole unit weighs 440 pounds. That's twice what a comparable gas outboard weighs. But here's the kicker: they warranty it for extended hours in commercial applications. That's like buying a truck with a 500,000-mile warranty. They're so confident in the German-engineered design that they'll let fish farms run these things 24/7 for years. The worst model on the market. Let me be clear, there really aren't any truly terrible diesel outboards because so few companies have managed to bring them to market. The barriers to entry are so high that only serious players with deep pockets have survived. What we do see are diesel stern drives marketed as outboard alternatives that dealers try to push when you ask about diesel outboards. Don't fall for it. The maintenance complexity and parts availability for these hybrid solutions make them a nightmare waiting to happen. Let's talk performance, and I'm going to shatter some illusions here. Diesel outboards are not fast. If you're used to a 300 horsepower Mercury pushing your center console to 45 knots, prepare for disappointment. That Cox CXO 300 diesel will get you to maybe 35 knots on the same hull, and it'll sound like you're driving a city bus while doing it. The torque curve is completely different. Diesels make peak torque at 2000 RPM versus 4000 RPM for gas engines. This means incredible hole shot with heavy loads, but they run out of breath up top like an asthmatic marathon runner. Where diesels embarrass gasoline outboards is fuel efficiency. Real-world testing shows diesel outboards burn 30 to 40% less fuel at cruise speeds. On a 30-foot center console running 200 miles offshore, that's the difference between carrying 150 gallons of fuel versus 225 gallons. That's 450 pounds less weight and $300 less per trip at current fuel prices. Over a season of serious fishing, we're talking $10,000 in savings, assuming you can stomach the $45,000 initial price premium for diesel power. The comparison to diesel inboards reveals the ugly truth about outboard packaging. A proper Cummins QSB 6.7 inboard makes 480 horsepower and sips fuel like a duchess at tea time. These diesel outboards are making 300 horsepower from 2-litre engines stressed to their absolute limits. It's like comparing a Kenworth to a tuned Honda Civic. Both might pull your boat, but one's engineered for million-mile reliability while the other is living on the edge. The power-to-weight ratio tells the whole story. Diesel inboards make about 1.5 horsepower per pound. Diesel outboards struggle to hit 0.68 horsepower per pound. Nobody mentions the warm-up requirements either. Diesel outboards need a solid 5-minute warm-up before you can hammer the throttle, or you'll glaze the cylinders faster than a donut shop on Sunday morning. Gas outboards, fire and go. This matters when you're trying to beat weather or chase birds, and it's why tournament fishermen won't touch diesel power with a 10-foot gaff. Here's the maintenance bomb manufacturers conveniently forget to mention. Diesel fuel grows algae. Not might grow, not could grow, but will grow algae if you let it sit more than 60 days. Every diesel outboard owner needs to budget for biocide treatments, fuel polishing systems, and water separator filters that need changing every 50 hours. That's $200 in filters alone per season, plus $500 for a proper fuel polishing if you get contamination. One bad tank of diesel with water contamination will destroy your high-pressure fuel pump faster than you can say warranty void. The injection systems on these engines operate at 29,000 psi. That's 10 times higher than gasoline direct injection. When something goes wrong, and it will, you're looking at $4,000 for a new high-pressure pump, $800 per injector, multiply by 4 or 6, and labor rates that'll make your mortgage payment look reasonable. Cox's system is particularly vulnerable because they use a common rail design with piezo injectors that cost $1,200 each and can't be rebuilt, only replaced. Cold weather operation is another nightmare they don't advertise. Below 40 degrees F, diesel fuel starts to gel. Sure, you can add anti-gel additives, but forget one treatment and you'll be replacing fuel lines like Christmas lights. The OXC engines have block heaters as an option, but they draw 1,500 watts. That's more than most marina pedestals can handle without tripping breakers. Yanmar's solution is elegant. They use a coolant-to-fuel heat exchanger that warms the fuel using engine heat, but it adds another failure point and costs $2,800 as an option. Here's something that'll really frost your props: future diesel exhaust fluid (DEF) requirements. While current diesel outboards meet EPA Tier 3 standards without DEF, the upcoming Tier 4 regulations for marine engines above 600 kilowatts already require it. When these requirements trickle down to smaller outboards, and they will, that's another fluid to monitor, another tank to fill, and another system to break. DEF crystallizes when it dries, clogging injectors that cost $400 each. Miss a DEF fill-up on future models and the engine could derate to 40% power. Imagine that happening 50 miles offshore. The manufacturers know this is coming, but they're not talking about it yet. Don't forget to like and share this content if you're enjoying it. Let's talk about who's really buying these diesel outboards and why manufacturers are hemorrhaging cash to develop them. The truth is, recreational sales are a rounding error. Cox Powertrain admits that 78% of their orders come from military and government contracts. The US Coast Guard alone has ordered 450 units at $48,000 each. That's a $21.6 million contract for engines you'll never see at your marina. The real money isn't in selling to weekend warriors. It's in defense contracts where single fuel policies mandate diesel power regardless of cost. Here's the dirty math manufacturers don't advertise. Cox spent approximately $150 million developing the CX-0300. At current production rates of 500 units annually with a $15,000 profit margin per engine, they need 20 years to break even, assuming nothing breaks and no warranty claims. OXC Marine, they're bleeding $8 million quarterly according to their latest financial reports, surviving on Swedish government subsidies and EU green energy grants that total $34 million since 2016. Without taxpayer support, they'd be bankrupt faster than a two-stroke in a no-wake zone. The Caribbean drug interdiction market is keeping these companies alive. One Bahamas Defense Force contract for 30 boats with twin OXE-300s netted $5.4 million. That's $90,000 per engine when you factor in the service contracts. Panama's Coast Guard bought 85 Cox units for their patrol fleet. Colombia ordered 120 OXE engines for river patrol boats. Notice a pattern. These aren't yacht clubs making purchases. It's governments with unlimited budgets fighting cartels who need the 600-mile range that diesel provides. Commercial fish farms represent the only legitimate civilian market, and they're buying bottom-tier 50-horsepower Neander units for $18,000 each. Scottish salmon farms have 300 of these running 24/7, but they only buy them because diesel fuel at remote sites costs half what gasoline does, and they can use the same fuel tanks as their generators. The 5-year total cost of ownership calculations only work when you're running 3,000 hours annually. For reference, the average recreational boater logs 50 hours per year. At that rate, the payback period is 60 years, assuming you live that long and inflation doesn't exist. The future of diesel outboards is actually fascinating, and it's nothing like what manufacturers are advertising. Behind closed doors, Mercury Marine developed a 175-horsepower diesel outboard for the US Department of Defense, a spark-ignited diesel that runs on military fuel. My source at their Fond du Lac facility says they've tested civilian versions, but they're sitting on the technology because it would cannibalize their high-margin gasoline engines. They're waiting for emissions regulations to force their hand, probably around 2027 when potential new standards kick in. Don't hold your breath for a civilian release, though. The military paid for that development, and Mercury likes their gasoline profit margins just fine. Hybrid diesel-electric outboards are the real revolution coming. Volvo Penta and ZF Marine have a joint venture developing a diesel outboard with an integrated 40-kilowatt electric motor. Silent trolling on electric, diesel generation for long-range cruising, and instant torque for docking. They're targeting 2026 launch, but the price point will be astronomical. Think $75,000 per engine. The military is already testing prototypes in Virginia, and the feedback is that they're game changers for special operations where acoustic signature matters. What nobody's discussing is the hydrogen injection technology that could make diesel outboards as clean as electric. Hydrogenics Corporation in Canada has developed a bolt-on system that injects hydrogen into the combustion chamber, reducing particulate emissions by 85% and increasing fuel efficiency by another 20%. Cox is secretly testing this on their military contracts, and preliminary results show they can meet 2035 emissions targets with current engine designs. The catch? It requires a hydrogen generation system that adds $15,000 to the package price. The Chinese are about to disrupt everything, but not in outboards. Weichai Power, the largest diesel engine manufacturer you've never heard of, dominates the inboard marine diesel market in Asia. They've been studying the outboard market closely, but the technical challenges have kept them focused on their profitable inboard business. When Chinese manufacturers do enter the diesel outboard market, and they will, they'll likely partner with or copy existing Western technology rather than develop from scratch. Industry insiders expect them to target 60% of current market prices, which will either force innovation or destroy margins industry-wide. Yamaha's already preparing defensive strategies, strengthening their partnership agreements to protect their technology. So here's the brutal truth about diesel outboards. They're a solution looking for a problem in recreational boating. For commercial operators running 2,000 hours annually, they're a no-brainer. For the average weekend warrior putting 100 hours on their engines yearly, they're an expensive science experiment. The fuel savings take 8 years to offset the purchase premium, assuming nothing breaks. And things will break because these engines are pushing mechanical limits that gasoline engines don't even approach. The technology is impressive, the engineering is borderline miraculous, but the execution is still catching up to the promise. If you're running a charter operation in the Bahamas where diesel costs $8 per gallon and reliability means reputation, diesel outboards make sense. If you're fishing Lake Michigan 6 weekends a year, stick with gasoline power and spend the savings on tackle and beer. What manufacturers won't tell you is that they're hedging their bets. Every major outboard company has diesel prototypes in testing, but they're deliberately slow-walking the technology because gasoline engines are more profitable. Service networks aren't trained, parts inventories don't exist, and the customer education curve is vertical. They're letting early adopters beta test the technology with their wallets while they refine designs for the inevitable regulatory push toward diesel efficiency. But the real disruption isn't diesel. It's the electric outboards that'll leapfrog this technology entirely. But that's a truth bomb for another video. If you found this deep dive into the diesel outboard conspiracy valuable, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Until next time, keep your props turning and your fuel clean, because in this industry, the house always wins unless you know their secrets.